Hey guys, welcome back to my channel Recap Corner. Today, I've got a special treat for you, a recap of the movie Blood and Bone. Spoilers ahead. Be prepared, watch out, and take care. We observed a group present within a maximum security prison, making their way towards the restroom where an individual known as Bone was located. Donnie cautioned Bone about the presence of a gang seeking to recruit violent offenders. As the gang approached the bathroom, Donnie emerged, and the leader of the gang threatened Bone, warning him that he would regret not joining their group. Bone removed his shirt and offered the gang leader a chance to flee before things got out of hand. However, the gang leader laughed off Bone's warning and launched an attack. Bone swiftly counterattacked, striking and ultimately stabbing the gang leader. When the other gang members attempted to retaliate, Bone's expert fighting skills allowed him to swiftly defeat them in a matter of seconds. He then instructed the defeated gang leader to relay a message to anyone else who might seek to harm him. After being released from prison, Bone heads to a hotel to reserve a room. Upon arrival, he encounters Tamara, the owner of the hotel, who shows him to his room while expressing her desire to avoid any issues with him. Bone assures her that he has no intention of causing trouble. Afterwards, Bone proceeds to the arena where the street fights are taking place. He observes a match between two individuals before the arrival of luxury cars carrying James and his entourage. The fight organizer, known as Pinball, then announces the upcoming bout. The fight features two combatants, one of whom is Hammerman, an undefeated fighter in James' employ. As the fight between Hammerman and the other fighter commences, Hammerman lands a series of heavy blows and emerges victorious. Pinball then awards the betting money to James before departing in his vehicle. However, to his surprise, Bone is waiting for him in the car. Initially mistaking him for a robber, Pinball becomes startled before Bone asks him to arrange a fight between himself and Hammerman. Initially, Pinball declines Bone's request, citing that he is an unknown fighter and arranging a fight would require a considerable amount of money. Undeterred, Bone offers him $250, explaining that it's all he has. A scene then shows James receiving a phone call from a prominent individual named Franklin, who requests that James eliminate a person named Daryl. While on the call, James notices Franklin's car parked nearby and observes as Pinball arrives with Bone to speak with him. James learns that Bone is the new fighter, but becomes agitated upon noticing Bone staring at his girlfriend, Angela, throughout their conversation. Concerned about Bone's behavior towards Angela, James warns his friend's girlfriend not to look at Bone in that manner. Meanwhile, Pinball cautions Bone against repeating his actions towards Angela. James and his men then leave the venue, and Pinball proceeds to organize Bone's first fight with another fighter. In Bone's first fight, his opponent is a large individual with slow movements. Bone quickly recognizes this weakness and lands a fatal blow, resulting in a swift victory. Pinball is ecstatic with Bone's success and suggests organizing fights for him outside the city to increase his fame, eventually culminating in a match against Hammerman. Pinball informed Bone about Angela, James' friend, revealing that she was married and expecting a child with another man. However, James had forcibly taken her from her husband after plotting his murder and subsequently throwing him in prison. Pinball disclosed that James had concealed Angela and her child in an undisclosed location, but unfortunately, Angela's life had spiraled into misery due to drug use. James and his associates were dining with Daryl and his girlfriend, who Franklin had advised to break up with. During the meal, James requested Daryl's girlfriend to play some music, and he began singing, encouraging everyone else to join in. However, things took a violent turn as James abruptly produced a sharp board and stabbed Daryl. He then ordered Hammerman to turn up the music and proceeded to beat Daryl to death. We observed Bone watching the horrific scene unfold from his hotel room. Additionally, we witness James at home as he confronts Angela and expresses his anger towards her for not giving him any attention. On the second day, James was accompanied by one of his associates, Teddy. Teddy presented a video of Bone's victorious fight to James, who then instructed him to gather all available information on Bone from the hotel. Meanwhile, Tamara became aware of Gerard's dealings with street gangs and cautioned him to steer clear of them. Old Roberto asked the gang members to leave, but they refused and continued to hurl insults at him. Suddenly, Bone arrived, causing the gang members to flee in haste. Pinball arrived to take Bone with him in his car, and they headed to a different location Bone to watch a street fight. Two girls were fighting, and one of them was named Vereda, who emerged as the winner of the fight. Pinball visited Tattoo, a person who had fighters, and arranged a fight between Bone and one of Tattoo's fighters. Before the fight commenced, Bone noticed that his opponent's shoulder was dropping as he landed blows. As the fight began, Bone dealt a fatal blow to his opponent, defeating him with a single punch. Overjoyed, Pinball informed Tattoo that Bone was capable of taking on two fighters at once. Tattoo informed Pinball that there were fighters ready, and Pinball felt compelled to get involved. The betting had doubled by the time the fight began. During the fight, Bone swiftly knocked out the first fighter with a powerful punch. He then proceeded to strike the second fighter, breaking his hand in the process. Bone informed Tattoo that he was willing to fight again if the bet was doubled. In response, Tattoo arranged for 10 fighters to take on Bone. However, Bone easily defeated all 10 of them with crushing blows. Despite winning the fight, Bone had to resort to force to take the money from Tattoo, who had raised a gun on him during the confrontation. Vereda became infatuated with Bone and gave him her phone number. Bone continued to train, and Pinball arranged street fights for him. Bone proved to be a formidable fighter, winning all of the fights that Pinball had organized for him. Bone and Pinball become increasingly wealthy and gain notoriety as Bone participates in high-stakes fights, winning them all. As Bone returns to the hotel, Tamara notices a minor injury and tends to his wound. Bone inquires about the children that Tamara has with her, and she reveals that she has been taking care of them for almost 3 years, with Gerard being under her care for only 1 year. Tamara expresses her admiration for Tachi, and Bone teaches her the fundamentals of the sport. On the following day, she observes as Bone instructs Gerard on the basics of the sport. Meanwhile, James pursues a girl in his car, suspecting her of leaking information about him. The girl pleaded with James not to harm her, but he ran her over with his car. Roberto witnessed the incident, and James instructs Teddy to attend Bone's fight. Hammerman, who was riding in the car with Teddy and under the influence of drugs, confronts Bone before the fight. Despite this, Pinball assures James that Bone will win the fight, and the fighters prepare to begin. During the fight, Hammerman attempted to strike Bone, but Bone's agility allowed him to evade the attack. Bone retaliated with a series of powerful blows, ultimately knocking out Hammerman with a kick. Pinball declared Bone the victor and went to collect the winning bet from James, who was furious. Despite this, James invited Bone to celebrate his victory over dinner. Pinball and Bone accompanied James to his house, where Bone saw Angela and gazed upon her. James observes Bone's disinterest and orders him to accompany him to his office. There, James expresses his admiration for all forms of combat sports and showcases a samurai sword, but Bone admits that he's not skilled with swords. James proceeds to inform Bone about Franklin, a major arms dealer who runs an international fighting game worth millions of dollars. Franklin has a fighter who has never lost a fight, and James wants Bone to face him in a bout that will cost $5 million. James tells Bone that he can become a rich man if he wins the fight, and that he won't have to fight again. Bone says he will think about it. Meanwhile, James notices that Bone is still watching Angela, who is looking for drugs that James has hidden. James invites Angela to the room to try to convince Bone to join the fight, but instead she pulls out a gun and threatens him. However, Bone recognizes her from a recommendation made by a friend in prison, who had also recommended her son before he was killed. Bone's best friend Donnie was Angela's husband, and he went to prison because of James. James also hired a gang in prison to harm Donnie. Bone holds Angela responsible for what happened to Donnie, but she reveals that James forced her to stay with him after he killed her husband and took her son from her. She does not know where her son is, but Bone tells her that he knows and promises to take her to him. The two leave together and appear to be enjoying themselves. After leaving Angela at the rehabilitating center and reuniting her with her son, Bone accompanies James to Franklin's mansion. James offers Franklin $5 million in exchange for a fight between Bone and his undefeated fighter. At first, Franklin is hesitant and expresses racist remarks towards James. However, in the end, Franklin agrees to the fight and sets a date for 3 days later. Bone is shocked to discover that the police are on the scene and have found Roberto dead. Tamara is deeply upset by Roberto's death. Bone learns that James's men are responsible for killing Roberto because Roberto witnessed James killing a girl. Bone was consoling Tamara when he was taken aback by the sudden appearance of James in the room. James was bewildered as to why Bone would abandon Angela, who he had taken from him, and sit with Tamara. He then informed Bone about the fight he had arranged for him with Franklin's fighter. However, Bone stunned James by telling him that he was still contemplating it and eventually refused to fight. This enraged James, who reminded Bone that he had placed a $5 million bet. As James was about to draw his sword, Bone intervened and struck him. After James left, Bone asked Tamara to take the children and find somewhere else to stay temporarily. Tamara had no other choice but to agree, and she asked Bone not to be around when she returned. James orders Teddy to eliminate Bone and Tamara. Meanwhile, Hammerman meets with Pinball and demands to know Bone's location. In a fit of rage, he strikes Pinball. However, Bone suddenly appears and kills Hammerman along with several of James' other men. James' daughter tells him that she knows where Angela is being treated, as she is also receiving care at the same facility. James instructed Teddy to eliminate Angela, but upon entering her room, they encountered Pinball, who held them at gunpoint. Bone unexpectedly emerged from behind and attacked, killing them all. Additionally, Pinball killed Teddy. When James attempted to reach out to Teddy, Bone answered and declared that he had already killed all of James' men and would come for James himself. James then shared his location with Bone and contacted Franklin, informing him that the fight must happen that day. Bone arrives at Franklin's mansion after receiving the location from James. He enters and notices that Franklin and James are accompanied by important men who are waiting to witness the fight between Bone and Franklin's fighter. James threatened Bone to fight or he would kill him, and he also threatened him for the next day. Bone told James that he would kill him for killing his friend Donnie, who was in prison. James, on the other hand, wanted to protect Angela, and he confessed to Bone that he was responsible for the deaths of both Donnie and Roberto. However, Bone had recorded everything, and he sent the video to Pinball, who then informed the police about James' crimes. Franklin's fighter arrives at the mansion, boasting that he will easily defeat Bone. The fight begins, with Bone initially struggling against his skilled opponent. However, Bone lands several powerful blows and ultimately wins the fight. Despite his victory, Bone surprisingly surrenders before the match is over. His actions confuse everyone, but Bone reveals that he did it on purpose to ensure that James would lose his bet of $5 million. James becomes furious and draws his sword, attempting to kill Bone. Franklin intervenes and orders his men to take away the swords to ensure a fair fight. To James's surprise, Bone reveals his own sword skills, which he had hidden from James earlier. In the heat of the battle, Bone manages to sever James's arm, causing him to flee from the scene. The police arrive to arrest James, who continues to threaten Franklin, accusing him of betrayal. After completing his mission, New Bone meets with Angela and Gerard at the hotel. Tamara had been taking care of Gerard in Angela's absence. New Bone had been behind their reunion, but he tells Angela that his work is done and that they should stay with Tamara. New Bone bids farewell to them and to Pinball, telling him that he will never fight again. He leaves the hotel, ready to start a new chapter in his life. After threatening Franklin, James is sent to prison where Bone was at the beginning of the movie. Franklin orders his gang to beat James, and the movie ends. Thank you for watching. Thank you for joining us into our review. We hope you had as much fun watching it as we did breaking it down for you. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss a video from us.